Hello everyone, this is Henry here from photographyhotspot.com and Henry's Camera Group here in Brisbane. If you come tuned into this is the second part of the photo shoot that I did in Brisbane City yesterday with regards to photographing the levitating statue in the heart of the city. So if you haven't seen that behind the scenes shot, you can follow a link that's on the description below and you can watch that. You can show me, that just shows me me yesterday in the city doing this little photo project that I wanted to do. So in this video, what I'm going to do is just going to go through a walkthrough of my workflow and what I do to edit the actual image. I did the edit last night without any recording, and I came up to this as the final image. So the idea is that I have him floating in midair as he naturally was, which was quite mesmerizing, and I wanted to capture that mesmerizing sort of illusion effect, that just defying physics sort of look in this particular image. So what I did is that I combined a still image of him as the statue with a whole bunch of four other long exposure photographs, and I did a pincushion effect to really give that warping sort of effect. So what I'm going to do in this tutorial, in this video, I'm going to spend, it takes about half an hour to do, and I'm going to go through from the images that came out of my camera to hopefully get something close to this sort of effect. I can't get it 100%, but I'm going to go through what I did last night, and so you can get the idea of what happened. So first thing, I photographed in RAW in all the images, and just first let me just go through the images that I have to work with. So the first image was that I took was to get a still photograph of the statue. I want one where he is as sharp as possible, so this is going to be preserved for the actual final image because I want him to be sharp and everything else blurred, as you saw. So what I did was I still had my 10-stop neutral density filter on my lens, and what I did was I increased my ISO setting to 1600, and I turned my aperture up as wide as possible on this particular lens, which is f2.8, which gave me a shutter speed of 1/8 of a second, which was fine because my camera was on a tripod throughout the whole time, which is another essential part for this particular image, because if I need to blend different exposures together to make one final image, it's very important that I have my all the compositions to look exactly the same so they can fit on top of each other without any misalignment. So a tripod is essential for this photo shoot. So this frame that you're seeing right now is the still photograph of the statue, and I'm only just going to be using this part of the image of this frame. The following frames are all a combination of different shots at different long exposures. So what I did is I turned my ISO back down to 100 to get a clean noiseless sort of shot. I increased my aperture to f10, so for greater depth of field, but also the more important part was that it was letting less light in, which allowed me to have longer shutter speeds with the 10-stop neutral density filter. At this photograph, you see it was an exposure for 30 seconds. I reduced the time frame down to 15 seconds, so the blur isn't as dramatic as 30 seconds. So this is a 15-second blur, and with that, I compensated by opening up my aperture to f8 from f10. Did that again, so open up the aperture a bit more, and I had to compensate. So going from 15 seconds, my third shot here was for 4 seconds, and then I just did another one for 4 seconds. So they are my long exposure shots. So the idea is to get these long exposure shots blended so I can get almost like a super long exposure shot at the very end to superimpose onto this still frame. So that's the idea. So the first thing that I've got to do is to make sure that all my colors, exposure, and distortions and crops are all right, because I do that all in Lightroom. And Lightroom is really cool in the sense where I can just edit one image and I can copy and sync all the settings and have them all on all the other following images in a quick click, so I don't have to repeat my process X amount of times with number of images that I have. So I'm going to work with the statue image here first. First thing I'm going to do is going to change the composition. I'm going to crop out this bottom part down here because it's not necessary in the photograph sense. So I activate the crop by pressing R on the keyboard, I'm going to chop it down to that line, up to here. So that's my crop that I'm going to work with. So that just tidied it up really quickly. I'm going to change the white balance, because by having neutral density filters, it does have a tendency to make your image quite cold. So I'm going to go from 5,200 to about, let's go 8,000. So that warms it up a bit. I'm going to increase the shadows just slightly to make sure that I have detail in there. And that's quite good. It's a good standpoint to work with. Let's brighten up let's have a look at the histogram and stuff over here. It's looking quite good. No jumps. I'm going to go to the tonal range, because this is just quite habit that I do. I just add a little bit of contrast in the shadows a bit. Bring down the darks. It's a good sort of standing point. I don't do too much here in Lightroom. Now I also want to do any lens distortions that I have on here as well. So I'm quite happy for this part of the image to be the base. I'm going to look very carefully to see how my subject looks, and making sure that there's not too much noise on him, which isn't too bad from what I'm seeing down here. So it's pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is to sync all these settings, so I'm going to get all these images looking consistent with regards to the white balance and just what I did with the settings just then. So what I do is I use that as my main image, and I hold down shift, go to all the other ones that I want. I right click on the first image, go to develop settings, and I go to sync settings here. So here's where I get to select on what I want to carry on or sync settings towards all of them, and they got them pretty good. So that's awesome. So I've done things like white balance, I did things to the tonal curve, I did things to lens correction, and I also changed the crop as well. So I just press synchronize here, and what that does is that it just carries on all those settings to these images, which just saves a whole bunch of time. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer all these photos into Photoshop, where I do the bulk of the work. So I'm just going to go into here and edit in Photoshop. Cool. Whilst that loads, I'm going to just take a few moments to talk about my little site that I'm doing. I'm starting up a photography community here in Brisbane, or online, called photographyhotspot.com. In Brisbane, it can be like a bit of a meetup group where I do workshops and photo shoots, sessions such as this. And that goes by the name of Henry's Camera Group. I think I might integrate all these names together one day, eventually, once I get it all done. And in Henry's Camera Group, and Photography Hotspot, I'm doing tutorials such as this. I do feedback on people's photographs, like critiques and feedback, CCs. Critiques and comments, I mean, where I have a look at the images and I give honest feedback to help people improve and tell them where they can, go that little bit better, get them to the next level of photography, to where they want to go, all in a helping sort of sense in a community. I also do whiteboard animations to teach people photography, those people who want to learn photography, or people who have had cameras for a long time, never really known how to use it. There's also a room for those type of people in that community as well. So if you know anyone that can benefit from that sort of stuff, I would really appreciate it if you share my website and let them know about it. And if you want to be proactive and take part of it, I do run those workshops as well, which are put up on my Facebook page, and you'll find that as well. So basically just subscribe to any of the videos I have, like my sites, and follow them the best you can. So that will keep you up to date with what's happening in my photography life. Okay, now all the images have been transferred over to Photoshop, which is fantastic. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images. Let's start off with the still photograph over here. Might be hearing quite a bit of static out here because it's actually raining outside, so which is kind of good. We can do with a bit of rain, keeps this room a lot cooler and more comfortable to work in. So we are having a look at the still image here, and it looks pretty good. Came out of Lightroom quite clean. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to press copy the layer, and I'll back that out. That's really raining out here. Let me see if I can just close that window so not so much distortion happening in the audio. Pardon me about that. So where was I? I was changing the name of this layer. So I'm going to keep everything as organized as I can so I can recognize each layer. So this one I'm going to call the statue. Okay, let's grab the first part of the long exposures. So let's go here. So my idea is that I combine a bunch of these long exposure shots, grabbing the best of each shot, because as you've seen, there was 30 seconds exposures, 15-second exposures, and 4-second exposures. So each one gives a different type of blur. The 30-second ones look very blurry. They look almost ethereal, whereas the 4-second ones just have a kind of a milder sort of effect. So if I combine them more, it gives that contrast in that sort of area as well, which adds impact to my image, to what I believe. So having a look at this particular long exposure shot, I like the area to what it's doing in this part of the image around here. So I'm going to grab this part and a little bit over here. My idea is that I don't want prominent sort of faces, so anything with distracting sort of looks, like this blue, this sort of aqua sort of stripy top, or this blue and white top. I don't want this part. So I can isolate and pinpoint exactly what I want in the actual image. I'm going to paint them all in. So this is the kind of fun part. So I'm pressing Command A on the keyboard, Command C to copy. So basically what I'm doing now is just copying and pasting layers. So I pop that layer on there. I'm going to rename it so I know where I'm going. So again, keeping myself well organized. So I'm going to call this one right side, because I'm grabbing the right side of over here. And I'm going to turn this into a mask. So by doing that, I hold down Option on Mac, and I click on here, which will make this layer a black mask. So what I do now is I press B to change my paintbrush tool, which is over here, and I press X to change from black as a foreground to white. And now I can paint in the area that I want. And like I said, I wanted it around here, so all I'm doing is I just paint that there. I'll get rid of these people here with that. Now remember that there was that girl here with these two girls with the stripy tops. I don't want to grab that. I'd rather keep it clean. I want the effect, but I don't want to create any distraction. So you've got to go with that happy medium. Now there were probably a few things that are happening on the left. So let's just see if there was anything around here. So I'm just lightly dabbing around here. Being very careful not to paint over my subject here. But, you know, if it happens, you know, I'm just working on a paintbrush. Like, white is the paint on, change it to black by pressing X, paints off. So, like, I'll show you a demonstration. I can just, if I made an error, I can just come straight back to the underneath layer, which is really cool about adjustment masks and maskings and stuff. So that's pretty cool. So my idea is that I don't want any distracting sort of effects. See how this girl in the top comes in? It becomes very distracting with her very bright sort of top. So I don't want that. If I can not paint that, I won't. I'd rather it like that. So that's basically what I did with an image here. So when that's done, oh, there's a bit of nice blur here. I don't mind that blur there. And some of the effects happening here. So I can paint that on by going white. So have her come out. Just slightly. Not too much, but slightly. I'll get rid of these people here with another exposure. So, because you can see they're still kind of standing still. So I think this was like the 15-second exposure. So anyone that was standing relatively still for 15 seconds would still remain still quite prominent in the actual scene. So that's that part there. But there's another frame here. So let's look at this one. See this? This particular frame, I like what's happening here. So I'm going to grab that for this particular image. So again, so copy, select all, copy, and paste. This time I'm going to call it left-hand side. Left side, because I'm working on the left side. Option, black out. Cool. Brush, white. Change area of brush, and it was around here. So let's grab some of that motion blur that's happening around here. So I'm just painting it in. It's lagging just a bit because I'm doing this video capture as well, so it's just taking a bit more resource. And what's the cool thing is that I use this left-hand side layer to paste over the bottom layer, so I get rid of some people that are standing up. So in this particular frame, these people have moved off, which was cool. So I don't have that distracting sort of look. Now I was saying like distracting sort of looks like this person's shirt here is a bit too heavy, so I'm just gonna lightly just brush it out, take off the impact that it has, and whoops, that makes the shoes more prominent. I don't want anything like that. His feet, can I get rid of his feet? And there. Being very careful not to go around the actual subject. So, a lot of effect there. Nice. And sometimes you can come across down here and see what it does. Like I know I did say left-hand side, but you might get some different sort of effects. You can blur and get some real cool sort of looks that's happening around here. Cool. So that's that side done. Let's look at what the next long exposure looks like. Now this one, I like the area just around here, but I don't want this person with the blue shirt. This sort of blur is happening pretty cool. I can get some of this sort of stuff like here, but not the person. I don't want his green shoes for sure. So let's copy and paste. Let me call this one kind of like inner left. So that's the prominent part I'm going to grab out of this. Inner left, again, make a mask. Out here, block out. It's actually not too bad. It's like I might bring a bit just to dab in and get some different colors going on, so it makes it very abstract. There was that person in black that was taking a photograph here. He's kind of cool, but I don't want his shoes, so up to about there is fine. If I go a little bit lower, his shoes are going to come in, so don't want that. But I can have his parts of his shirt. Like I know it's his shirt and his arms are crossed or something that he had, but you can't really tell, and that's where you want to go that blend. I want to get rid of this target, this paper bag down here, which is kind of cool, which is not cool, I guess. I'm not advertising for Target here. So that makes it more abstracty sort of look. Okay, cool. Let's have a look at the last frame here. Now this last frame has a lot of effect that's happening next to him, which is really good. So I'm gonna copy, paste. So there was no magic number of how many exposures you can get. You can get as many as you want. You just keep repeating this process. But I chose 5. So make a mask, and this was kind of inner. So this is, let's go and call this central. Just a random name that I pull out from the top of my head. Now, got to be very careful not to impact him with these sort of selections as well. So I'm going to go on the mask. I'm going to go to a smaller size mask. Now with this one, I can get rid of this person that's just standing back down here. Got to be very careful. I don't want to affect his shoulder and his hat, because I don't want to create a blur of all that. So that would just defeat the purpose of all that. So, oops. Cancel that. I wasn't paint. Make sure you paint on the actual mask. There we go. Get rid of him. There we go. Although it's blue, it looks better than having that. And I think that part that's coming up is actually the shoulder of our levitating statue over that different time period. So I'm going to go like that. And I remember all the cool effect was happening around here. So we can have this around here like that. That's awesome. And around here. That's pretty good too. Making sure that he doesn't come back up. Now, see if I can get rid of this person with orange here, which will be good if I can. Yeah, let's get that. It's pretty good working with a Wacom tablet as well, because it makes it like a pen. It gives it that artistic sort of feel. It's quite therapeutic, to be honest. Okay, that's what I think anyways. Nice, more motion blur. More motion blur. I think there's more blur happening around here. Nice. Oh, look at that. That's cool. Nice bit of shoes. I don't want those shoes. Let me just dab at bits that I want. Grab and take. It's a bit of a balancing sort of act, but nice. Now we've got this super long exposure happening around here, which is a combination of all these different exposures. So you have this effect of all this movement that's happening around him, yet he just levitates there still, which is really awesome, actually, even to the eye. There was so many people around him. Alright, now what I've done here, I'm quite happy with the long exposure sort of effect. Now what I'm going to do is add a pincushion effect to all these images. Now hopefully I've done it in the right order. I can't remember if I did this first or before, but what I'm going to do is to warp it to give the more of a defying sort of physics sort of look. So to find that filter, I go up to the filter area and I go to distort and I go to pinch. I'm going to work on my first layer on the right hand side part that I affected. Let's see what it does. So distort, pinch. Opens up this sort of window. And I just go up to 100%, you know, just go all out. Live life on the edge. See what it does. Cool. See what it just gives it the warping sort of effect. It changed the look on these names and name tags and stuff. So I go to an undo. You can see the before. See how it's all still here, and I add this effect. And like I said, this only affects the right hand side of the actual image. And it does that. It kind of warps it all in that way, which is pretty cool. Let's go to the left hand side. Let's do the same thing. So from there I can just have a shortcut, just repeats the last filter. So this should warp out this side. Awesome. Again, repeat, pinch. Nice. And that one, in the central part, I go to the pinch. Very cool. So that's really pushed it all in and stuff. It's done some really funky effects to these lines and these buildings. It kind of feels like he's just tunneling through. But it's also affected my subject a bit. So what's going to happen is, I think it was this last one that did it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint out that area with a black mask. Just bring back what was there before. So I'm bringing back right down to the bottom layer. Looks like that sign has come onto him as well. That might be from one of these sort of previous layers. Don't know which one, just want to make sure. And I get it. Yeah, it's from this layer right here. There we go. We don't want any of that happening. Oops, wrong button. Making sure that he stays clean. So don't touch my subject. It looks like I'll bring back that because that guy started coming. There we go. I've really mucked him up now. That's cool. Nice, nice. Okay. Awesome. So that's basically the long exposures and all the exposures blending part done. So let's close these. I close all these images to, save myself a bit of memory. Now to make things like pretty organized, I'm gonna put all these in a folder just in case. It's a redundancy sort of thing. So I'll keep myself organized by putting all those long exposures into a folder, a group folder. I'm gonna name this exposure blend. Cool. So what I'm going to do is, now that I have that backed up, I'm going to make a layer with all these. Control J. Oops, not copy. I want to copy so what I do is I open that up, so I have an exposure blend, so I have that one preserved, so I can close that, make sure that's preserved. All of these, I merge it down as a layer. So what I'm doing, I'm just making a checkpoint for myself. So I have this layer is all of that, so I'm working on one sort of layer here now, whereas if I need to go back just in case to work on any parts of these pinching or fixing up down here, I can still do it in this part. So I'm creating a non-destructive sort of edit here. If worst comes to worst, I can just repeat, I can delete this layer and just copy and paste and make another one and start this part again. Because what I'm going to do now is work on the contrast and the colors now. So I've done all my long exposures. So what I'm going to do now is going to open up an external app called Luminar from Macphun. Oh yeah, can't export because it's so big. Let that open. Yeah, so whilst another thing loads, let's talk about the community, what's in plan. Once I get these videos uploaded, I'm going to be doing my first set of CCs tonight, which is comments and feedback. So they are images that people have emailed me for me to have a look at. And I'll have a look at them, like I mentioned this before, I'll have a look at them, give them my honest review and say what's good about it, what areas you can potentially work at, how to solve some potential problems that may have been in there, just to help out other photographers that are getting into it and then want to get up to that next sort of level. So I provide that sort of feedback and service as well, which I think is fantastic. I wish I had that sort of community when I was growing up and learning photography 15 years ago. And so that's a CC part. If you ever want to take part in that, all you have to do is send an email to email@photographyhotspot.com. Quite easy to remember. And I'll go from there. And have we opened up Luminar? Here we are. So now Luminar's open. Now back into it. Now, this is the external sort of app that I bought from Macphun, which is pretty cool in some areas. It comes with some pretty nice presets, and for this particular image I chose from the street preset and I did center of attention. Just makes so much sense. I just saw that name, I thought, hey, let's try that and see what that does, which is pretty cool because what it does, it creates like a vignette and it just emphasizes what happens in the middle, which is exactly what I want. So what it does is darkens the image and it does all this all this cool stuff to the middle and just brings the focus to the actual subject in the center, which is my levitating statue. So so simple. I just go there. It is a whole bunch of sliders and a set of presets, and I just go to apply. You know, that's that part done. And that would get that processed here, and it'll go back to Photoshop as another filter. So where was I saying before? Yeah, that's CC. Another thing that I do is I make whiteboard animations to teach people photography, like the different concepts about that. So anyone who's learning photography or wants to get better at using their camera or learn how to use their camera, finally, this is a great community as well for them. All right, so now the Luminar exposure, the Luminar effect center of attention has happened. So we've got that happening here. So before that effect and after, which is really good. Now what I'm going to do is to use another third-party app called Nick Collections, and we're going to work on contrast now. So I'm going to boost something what's called Pro Contrast and Tonal Contrast, just to give the image some pop, just to make it really, really stand out. And we'll be coming pretty close towards the end of the actual edit after that, because I don't remember any parts much after that, to be honest. So here is Tonal Contrast. It gives a pretty dramatic sort of effect, as you can see, and it kept the settings I had before. So in here I just had tonal contrast here, move a few sliders. I'm going to add another filter. I'm going to go Pro Contrast on top of that, increase what is known as dynamic contrast. Let's go to about 25%. What's good about Pro Contrast that's different to the normal contrast is that it only affects the contrast within your midtones whilst preserving what's to the left and to the right of your histogram, so without any clippings and effects. So you're just adding more punch to your midtones with Pro Contrast. Tonal Contrast gives it kind of like a almost like a HDR sort of look. It follows the same sort of algorithm as HDR, but you don't want to overpower it and stuff. Like, I definitely don't want that overhitting here. So what I'm actually going to do with this particular one is actually use one of the control points and tell it negative, go negative, and I want to go negative on my subject. Please don't touch my subject. And change the effect area. I'm going to have a look at the actual mask and see where it's affecting, where it's not. So what I don't want it to affect is the person. So I'm just copy and pasting that. So I'm just making sure that he's not getting affected so much. So much like the masking before, what's black doesn't get affected. What moves towards white is where the effects happen. So I don't really care what happens to the edge of all this. All this is effect. I just want this part to remain clean. So I try and select my subject to the best of my ability. Let's make sure his face is darked out there. I want to change the impact area to that. Change the impact area to something very small, so I'm controlling it to his legs. This one, it's quite a smart sort of program with this. You got to work with the algorithm there, and this one just go onto his arms. Just maybe around there. Grab another one. Maybe another one there. And another one there. Another one there. Cool. So it's pretty much him. Okay. So that's that part done. Let's close that. That's really heavy. Let's go tone that down just a bit. I can change the opacity of how this effect works because it makes another layer on top, and I might not use 100% of that because that's quite intense. You just want it subtle. You want your effects to be subtle but yet not overdo it. If you overdo it, it just looks terrible. You're better to underdo effects than you are to overdo effects. Okay, so let that happen. So whilst that happens, yeah, and the last thing that I tend to do for my community is that I run photography workshops here in Brisbane. So I do one-on-one sort of teaching, or 1 to 5. I don't like large groups in a sense. Well, that's a very strong effect. That's a very, very strong effect. What I probably can do, yeah, that's pretty strong. I might make a mask. Like, one thing that I look at, it's hurt my subject, which is what I don't want. So I'll make a mask, bring up that old trusty mask again, go black that out, make sure he is safe. Make a soft brush, so it's affect a lot on his arms down here. Make sure he's safe there. What's happened to your hands, mate? Alright. And down here. Oops. Go on the mask. Bring that back. Soft brush. It's a very strong effect. I like what it's done to the ground, but not that much. Let's go from the opacity. Let's bring it down to about 48%. Somewhere along the lines, I've hurt his hands somewhere. Which is somewhere on the diggings. There. Once when we got from here, this is quite a strong sort of effect. I might tone that down just even a little. Actually, might start that contrast blend again. From here, let's go filter. Let's go Nick's Collection, Color Efex Pro. I think I'll separate the tonal contrast to the Pro contrast. So what's this one? This one is tonal contrast. Bring back the shadows. Bring back the mid-tones. Okay. Somewhere along the lines, I've hurt his hands somewhere, which is kind of doing my head in a bit. I don't know where. I'm tempted to go. I don't recall seeing that when I was doing the exposure blend, or even up to Luminar. But what happened? I don't know. I think if I... Yeah, it's starting to do my head in. I'm going to backtrack and go back. Remember that redundancy plan? Was that there when I... Yeah, when did his hands disappear? That's what I did not want. Okay, see, so I just backtrack the way that I go. What I could do... There he goes. There he comes. Where were you? Where were you, buddy? Come back. Yeah, don't go away. There we are. Nice. Okay. Now we got that. Now we copy, exposure blend, copy. Control E. Awesome. Now we go back to Luminar. Sorry about that. Sometimes, yeah, that's the thing about, good thing about making redundancy areas. I went back to my checkpoint to find out where he disappeared off to, because you could just get carried away and you go, oh, hang on a second. What happened to his hands and stuff? And if you delete it and done destructive editing, it would have been a nightmare to pull back. What I just did then is just I backtracked, went back to my redundancy part where I thought, yep, this part looks cool. I'm ready to do the next step, because that part was a an exposure blend sort of problem. So it's always good to have redundancy areas. So I apply my center of attention effect, which these Luminar just works really fast. I just choose a preset here. Nothing wrong with using presets that have already been made. It just saves you a bunch of time. Don't let that be your and end all, because then your photographs will look quite standard and stuff. But I've already done a whole bunch of effects, so it's already unique in its own way. So that's that part. Cool. Let's add in tonal contrast. Righto, cool. Now we are on this image. Go to tonal contrast. See, he doesn't look too bad now. Before he looked really destructive on the part, but this effect is actually not too bad. I'm going to go okay with it. I'm just going to go with it. Go add filter. Next one's pro contrast. It's just on my little recipe that I like to add. I add pro contrast and a bit of tonal contrast. It gives emphasis to the ground area. I like what it does to the ground. Dynamic contrast tends to lighten it up a bit, which not too much. I'm going about 6%. But tonal contrast was where my kicker was. Right here. This is where all the guts and impact comes from. Let's put that so it's calculating down there. Just going a little bit slower than usual, because like I said, I've got this screen capture happening, which is fine. This edit took about 45 minutes anyway to make. So this is what happens to like a photo project. You know, you take a bit of time, you can do this within a day. It's quite therapeutic. And I go, okay. And once when this is done, that's pretty much it. The last thing that I do is I just put my watermark at the end of the actual image. Watermarks I made in Adobe Illustrator. Nothing too special about them. Awesome. Cool. Now, I'm just going to pick a signature that I made. I'm going to use a white one. White to this area because it's contrasty. Wouldn't use a black one. Pop that there. It's going to be quite massive, I'd imagine. Comes out there. She is. Just let me have cropping space. It's a vector tool, so I can adjust, keep the proportions right by holding shift. Let's go to about there. It's a work of art, I think. You know, I've done a lot of work to it. I want to keep it unique. I want to put my name on there. I don't intend to print it out or anything. If I want to print something out, I don't put my watermark on there unless it's exclusively required to. But if it's something that goes on the web, I emphasize putting watermarks on there so people know it's your work. That is basically it. That's my finished product. Now, does that look very similar to my original one that I was going to promise to show you at the very start? Let's go back to Lightroom. when Lightroom loads. And this is one I did last night. So pretty similar. Oh, it looks a little bit different, but yeah, you have your different moods and changes. This one's a lot brighter that's happening around here. But you can see the idea. I don't know which one's better. I haven't posted any of them up just yet, so I'll leave it with me for a day. So that one had a bit more emphasis down here, which is fine. But you can see the effect. So that's my project for the Levitating Man. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. It's a little bit long. I do apologize, and if you did manage to stick to it the whole time, I do thank you, because you spent a good time of your day just watching this. I hope that you learned something from it, and you gathered some new tips and a new inspiration to take some photographs for yourself. Would be fantastic. Yeah, thank you for to get to this point of the video. Really appreciate it. Please give thumbs up if you found it really great. Write comments on there, because that would just encourage me, and it just intrinsically motivate me to do more, to give back to people such as like yourself. That'll be fantastic. Subscribe to my channel, keep an eye out, bookmark my website, follow my Instagram, my photography page, my Facebook pages and stuff, so you can keep up to date with what's going on. Ask me questions wherever possible. I have email, anywhere. I'm happy to help whoever who asks questions about photography. Till then, take care, enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I hope to see you guys soon.